Hello there, how are you doing? Um, I wanted to do like a video response of some kind to Anneke at Nobody Here's channel. She's lately, maybe I just hooked up with her recently, but lately I've been watching more of her sort of half impromptu chats where she goes into all sorts of quite difficult, subject material about society and people and psychology and all that. And I love listening to that stuff. I am just, she makes me think. You make me think. That's great. I love that. So, what I'm coming from, where I'm coming from at this moment, is this notion, basically the notion of forgiveness or remorse, repentance and forgiveness, and then what you're supposed to be doing with that in all sorts of human context. And I keep just having the same type of thought. So here's my thought. It's about what could start off as a concept. I think it is more than a concept. It is a need that each and every one of us has, that is intrinsic in being human, at the very least. Okay? The need for sovereignty. And because I've been thinking around that and working with that concept or idea, or the realization of that need to the extent that I'm capable of that for quite a while now, I'm kind of obsessed also. And it's like sovereignty, the need for sovereignty is invisible. You can't measure it. And it's like it is behind everything. So every time I look or I listen to this type of discussion, or like the information that is presented, I feel that there is this big hole, invisible hole, in the middle of the discussion or in the middle of the thought process that is just begging for people to become aware of their own and other people's need for sovereignty. So let me say one thing. The one thing that comes to my mind right now is you cannot be a sovereign human being on your own. If I want to be a sovereign human being, that applies to everyone else, because that's the nature of true sovereignty. Sovereignty, the word, originates in notions of kingship, being a sovereign, being a ruler of some type. And that is both positive and negative, possibly, in how you think about that type of stuff. Because it does have a lot to do with, as far as I see it, and the way I try to, God helping, to practice this type of thing. It is a lot about governing your emotions, yes, but it is more than that, about understanding, and then from there on, for yourself choosing, a certain type of self-governance or self-control, if you like. For me, quite a bit, maybe 60%, I don't know, of all my sovereignty endeavors revolves around some form of self-control, self-organization, because I am a very emotional type. So I tend to blow up really easily. And I don't want anybody to know about this, but I'm telling the internet anyway. So, yeah. Now that I have found ways to sort of self-govern, or also be patient with myself, basically because I understand where I'm coming from. And I can kind of see for myself that this is a bottomless rabbit hole. If I get upset and I just let myself go along into the, vortex down, I will make myself sick. And at some point, I will find it less and less possible even to come out of that anymore. And in the vortex, I have no governance by definition. That is the place where there is absolutely no hope of governance for me or for my situation, my life, etc. Everything just spirals out of control and I go nuts. Going nuts is pointless. So I quite often have the choice, or at least I try to position myself in the sweet spot where I have some type of choice. So I can feel the feeling, I can feel what I am going through, I can feel that this is, not good, or I am, having an issue with something. I am feeling it. But I'm not letting the vortex take over anymore, or at least I try not to. It's difficult. It's a process. And yes, baby steps, one step at a time. And there are moments where I, without any warning, just because of a text message of some sort, I'm already halfway down the rabbit hole before I know it. And I'm bawling my eyes out and I'm miserable and desperate, basically, because what I'm afterwards, at this moment, what I'm seeing is the collapse of the sovereign network. So I'm going to come back to Anneke's statements and, thought processes here for a bit, as far as I can, because, memory serving. She was interested in when, how, and why, as far as I picked up, okay? This is what I picked up from a bit where I thought, now this is what I want to talk to. I want to talk to this issue here with my, insight, my perspective on that. Basically, what I felt like she was asking was, how do remorse and forgiveness make an actual difference in the process of a situation which was unfair? And it's still unfair. So, and she said, a person who refuses to forgive, a person who refuses to acknowledge the other person's remorse, for real, it's for real, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, and I was being whatever. And that person blocks further development. And what are you supposed to do? If you're the culprit and you said you're sorry and the other one just can't forgive you, what can you do about that? And they give you the silent treatment. Oh, for 2 weeks. Oh dear. Yeah. I've been there. I've been in that position. And I'm thinking, this is where the need for sovereignty, this huge invisible bubble in the middle of us that wants to be realized. It wants us to be fully individual. It wants us to be kings and queens of our own lives. That's where that ties up in relationship. And that's why we cannot be sovereign human beings without everybody else being sovereign as well, whether they're ready or not. And that's the interesting bit. It looks like we're becoming sovereign individuals slowly, all of us, all together, more or less, thanks to these types of dynamics. So when a person doesn't forgive because whatever, they're not ready yet, mainly it's because their consciousness, sometimes it can be really like something organic or visceral in that person. I have a husband who's like that, it takes him a day longer than it takes me to do the thing from, the sinus wave and the emotion, where you kind of shift one step at a time from being angry and upset and defensive and, all hemmed in, and from that state to go to a state of, I acknowledge suddenly that our relationship is about way more than this, way more. And you have a million qualities that I love. And okay, you were an asshole, but I can forgive. I can now, because I get perspective. The inside, that's what my psychological sense says about this type of thing. It's a process stepping from that state to that state, and it takes time. And some of us have more practice than others, maybe. I don't know, that may be one thing. And we're not the same. People are different. Some people take more time and need more time, and they get there in the end. And when they do, you can feel it. So, and sometimes it doesn't happen. I think another thing that happens is, once a person, anyone, whether it's in the relationship or in general even, when a person gets angry, I'm thinking especially about the generation of our parents here. Once they got angry, it very quickly devolved into anger that needed expression. Oh yes. And that had never been expressed before, or not enough, about things that happened to them way before us. So we as the kids, my husband and I as the children of those people, we were faced with angry parents. In my case, my mum. In his case, his dad, who had this permanent suitcase that they carried around with them, full of anger, full of resentment, and all sorts of lack of personal sovereignty that had happened to them, things that had happened where they were bullied and pushed and ignored and, left to suffer in all sorts of ways. And if you just did this wrong, what it felt like to us, the whole suitcase would open and you'd be smothered and drowned in rage. And all of it was constantly, screwed very tightly together in a ball of this person, also the other person, the parent, in the person in position of power, really, being in conflict with themselves at how they were expressing this, how they were handling this. So, triple flip, horrible. And all this kind of stuff happened to so many people out there. So I think it's fabulous that we can use YouTube to talk about these things. Oh my God, it's just amazing. And it's something our parents couldn't have dreamt of. This level of openness and this level of sharing and the level of honesty and straightforwardness. Like I can, I have to sometimes mess around a bit to get the words and to get my ideas across. And everybody does that. We're making this happen. We're working on it, and it's an ongoing process. We're communicating way more and way better. And so, yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm just so chuffed, you guys. So chuffed to have people that I can talk to. It's the best thing in the world. People to talk to. Oh, yeah. So, because... I'm coming back to my sovereignty thing here. For me, personal sovereignty has a lot to do with being able to express myself in words, express my thoughts in words, express it with my face if I can, or with, waving of hands and stuff like that. I am, in that sense, I think, in my need for this, I am very much a conjunction of my father's more verbally, verbal fluency. I don't know how to put that. His capacity for words, really, and my mother's sense of what was right, and trying to think and trying to figure out what was right and what was the right thing to do or the right idea to have and that type of thing. She was a lot calmer and a lot less. She also tried really hard to be objective, which she failed at, I think, but because there were parts of her personality that she couldn't express without all the anger coming out. So there you go. So I suppose that big truckloads of emotions like that haven't been expressed, we can realize that nowadays that these emotions are like barriers to an expression of a person's sovereign being. So when in fact the anger in any form or kind is part of the process. But those people that I'm talking about now, my parents' generation and all that, they are passed away, so we cannot help them anymore. I would like very dearly for my mom to be right here with us and to be engaged in this conversation. In this, that's something that just makes me, it makes me hyperventilate slightly to think of her being here, because the first thing she would do was to take over. So there would be that much less of a sovereign me to do the speaking. I've been confronted with the search and the need and the lack of sovereignty over the past couple of days, endlessly. So it's exhausting. But I wanted, basically at this moment, I wanted to sort of postulate the concept of this need and the search for personal sovereignty right in the middle there, and all the rest of the processes and the searching and the thinking and the suffering that we're doing hinges around that invisible area, more or less. The whole dichotomy of power versus powerlessness, these are like primitive expressions. Both of them are primitive expressions of what is to come, where there will be no more power, there will be no more powerlessness. At some point in the beautiful, pretty future that I can see, that I'm trying to share here, where understanding and compassion and also empathy and relationship suddenly have won, and it'll be a long story yet, I think. But I'm trying to think here whether I can say any more that could define this whole sovereignty thing. Yes, I think there's another dichotomy other than power and powerlessness. There's a dichotomy between freedom and responsibility also. And those are also terms that we need. We need both of those. And you cannot have real freedom without responsibility. You cannot have real responsibility. You cannot have real responsible people if they're not free. And a lot of the power, the orgies of power of the Second World War and before, all that was, a lot of it was, if only we tell people what to do, they will behave. And it didn't really turn out that way. So after the war in Europe, we've had to, and I think we're still trying to figure out ways to have what I like to call democracy, where everybody has a say, where everybody is free, as long as they're responsible. So that means that they have to, we have to sort of live with each other. in Holland, in the Netherlands, that's how things go. We have an enormous population density in this country, and then I can talk easy because I live in the countryside. But even here, you have moments where people get killed. People go crazy. People just can't stand it anymore, and things get publicized, and people just have to figure it out together. And in Holland, we have a history over the past couple of centuries of I suppose that having a sense of responsibility is really crucial to us. I am, as a people, so very many Northwestern European people have a desire for a quiet life where things are more or less organized and predictable and safe, and we have a good life, and we are really grateful for that, and we want to keep it that way, and and because we're used to that, and that's also, I think, it's a very important factor, and it's why why I can say these things is because we have we know what it's like when it doesn't work this way, and when you can't count on anything anymore. We kind of remember, basically, and it's not that long ago that we were completely overrun. And I think it's kind of specially applies to Holland, to the Netherlands, because we were overrun, and I suppose to some extent the Nazis tried to, what's that, from Star Trek? They tried to assimilate us. And some people were assimilated. And I'm referring to the Borg in the Star Trek series, Next Generation and what have you, where it's a race of a mixture of robot and human. And I think it's a brilliant idea because it's typical of how things, it's like a vision of how things can go wrong by being, totalitarian about things. And I'm not being very clear here, I feel like I should, have more of a have more of a structure to my approach here. But basically, I'm referring to the Borg because they tried to assimilate everyone. The only approach they had to new people that they met out in the universe was to assimilate them. And that meant making them into machines, making them into drones. So every single individual person became the same, really. And they always said, your qualities will be added to our own. So the qualities, the things that make a person interesting and make them an individual were incorporated to some extent. I mean, you cannot really incorporate an individual, can you? If there is the virus of sovereignty would spread like wildfire. Now that's an interesting thought. And I suppose that's kind of what's happening. That's what I see happening, and everybody. What's with information technology that we have nowadays and social media and all, where everything gets shared. Every share is like a test case of how do you deal with this? How does it affect you? How do you relate? Can you do anything with this? What do we want? That's the question. Morning, noon, and night. What do we want? And I think that so for me, anyway, I'm speaking for myself here, and I think it applies to more or less anybody. I believe in sovereignty as a universal need and thirst even. It's overpowering to all of us. But you can call it something else. You can say, at this point, I need freedom, because that's the thing, that's the next step for you, because you're not free. I'm hypothetically in a situation where you're not free. The first thing you want is freedom. Yes, of course. And then after a while, if you're, suppose you free yourself, you manage to organize that. I think that's a very sovereign action, by the way. You create this new position for yourself, for your children, what have you, because then, of course, you find out that the children need to be free as well. And then suddenly you have to organize freedom without, paving it over with a parking lot, like in the song, But it's a process, and the goal of the process is sovereignty. And behind sovereignty, behind this junction of freedom and responsibility, because responsibility will mean also knowledge, understanding, and taking up a task in any way that you can. So that will be different for everyone as well. And for me personally, being responsible has a lot to do with not going into the vortex, not going into emotional mayhem, because the damage control is a nightmare. So whenever that type of thing happens, where I get desperate and I can't see the end of the street anymore, my responsibility in the first instance is to, get the cortisones to go down, get the adrenaline to go down, so I can function again. I can because I'm responsible for this situation, for this household, for there being food on the table, for the laundry getting done, for, typical stuff like that. But I'm also responsible for my mood, because I have to deal with someone else who is also a sensitive, receptive person. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the mood where you need the other guy's forgiveness because you have a relationship with them. If you don't have a relationship, you can still be completely flummoxed by the lack of acceptance that because you spill coffee on them or something like that, something silly, something innocuous and harmless. And they bring the whole suitcase of mad anger and rage and all that to you. And you really didn't deserve to get that type of reaction. But that is what relationship means. It is a dynamic that often we have chosen, and we have to because we are social people. That's what being people means. It is not just me. It is not just you. It is what have we brought to each other that is positive and instructive emotionally. My husband and I we have been together for 32 years, and we bring a lot of good stuff to the table each and every time. Regularly we say to each other that we learn stuff from the other guy all the time. And plus it's nice being together, really. So we kind of complement each other. You have all this good stuff that sort of stands, and it will stand whether the mood goes down the hill or into the vortex or not. You have a lot to give. You have a lot of value. So that's another thing that I'm missing in all the academic descriptions of things is, and if you go to this idea of personal sovereignty, I find that a lot of the negative descriptions of the lack of things really sort of flip over, in my mind, into a description of what it should be or what it can be, what it already has, what the values are that are already there, and that you can build on. This is one really helpful approach. I've found this quite helpful in my own life, where and I'm not saying I'm going to ignore the negative things. That's not what I'm saying. I'm first cataloging a lot of the limitations and things. Then I'm going, why is this a problem? It's a problem because I don't feel like a sovereign human being. Boom, always. So in each of these cases, what can I do? And quite often it will be, what I can do will be to re-engage in the conversation, to reapply, to reinvest, go back, because what they're saying, whatever it was in that text message, it's just, I can understand where they're coming from, basically. And even if I don't, I have had to learn this in the life that I led with my mother. If I just magically find the strength in myself to take a step towards them, to re-engage the conversation, to find some type of magical potion to infuse in this nightmare, then the tables turn and forgiveness will come, or life returns. And that's what I'm really trying to describe here, is this process where the positive sides of that relationship that you have are contacted again. There's the awareness broadens, and we are not limited to the vortex. Of course not. Even though it may feel a great deal of the time that all we really know, that all that is really real in our lives is that vortex of pain and misery and despair. And there's a word that comes to my mind each time when I'm describing this type of thing, this type of mood, and it's a Dutch word, and it is uitzichtloos. The loos at the end means without, and uitzicht is a view. So like a view from the hilltop over the valleys and stuff like that, in the sunshine with bumblebees and buttercups and all that type of stuff. That's uitzicht. Uitzicht is to see out, really. And and it has to do with like having a perspective, sort of. But an uitzichtloos type of situation is a situation where there's no perspective. So where it is a pointless and there's no hope and so on and so forth. And sometimes words cannot really be translated properly. So that's why I'm giving you a Dutch word here in the middle of all this. Oh yes, the desire for sovereignty. If you just think about it, put this in the middle and then see how everything else is about that, really. It's like an engine that is driving human evolution forward, regardless of the suffering and the sacrifice. Because we're going to get there, no matter what. On that note, thank you so much for being here, guys. I'm going to upload this right now. Thank you for watching, and I will be seeing you again soon, hopefully, because I have cards to show, because I've been working on my Kazanlar. Yes, that's the Ace of Pentacles right there. With gold. See? Nice. Love it. Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.